Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yovanov. Today's guest comes to us from New York, via London, via Sydney. They are an actor, writer, musician, podcaster, and creator of the website Filmed Live Musicals, is working on the Consortium of American Stream Theater, but most importantly, they are a bookish sprite with a charming and cheery disposition. And honestly, how can I not want to talk to a cheery and charming sprite? It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show, Luisa Lyons. Hello, Luisa.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. I start every one of my interviews the same because we want to know who you are. So we're always looking for a 30-second bio of Luisa. So who is Luisa in 30 seconds?
I feel like you just did it in the intro. I was born in Australia. I grew up watching musicals with my grandmother, watching VHS of, classic movies from the 50s and 60s, the golden age of MGM and Hollywood, and fell in love with musical theater when I was 10, saw my first live stage production, which was a chorus line, and said, I want to do that. And actually took a circuitous route to becoming an actor. I studied English and history in my undergrad, and then long story short, ended up in London studying musical theater at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. And on the way to drama school, I met my husband in the US. We worked at a summer camp together. And when we met, I told him, this is not going to be a long-term relationship. This is a summer fling. I'm not interested in long-term, long distance. And 10 years later, here we are. So I moved to the US, and shortly after we moved to New York, I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia at the age of 29. And it was horrible experience. I couldn't, I was immune suppressed. I couldn't eat takeout, couldn't ride the subway, and most importantly, couldn't go to the theater. And I had written my thesis on filmed live musicals while at Central. And so I had this list of musicals I could watch from home, and I decided to turn that into a website. And fast forward, and here we are. And I've built the most comprehensive website of a database of stage musicals that have been legally filmed and made available to the public.
Very cool. We're going to talk about all that stuff for sure. And you've had the longest summer ever, it seems, 10 years now and counting. Summer fling.
Oh, yes.
So.
It's funny, when I moved to America, Aaron was living in Colorado, and I arrived right in time for the polar vortex.
Oh, geez.
Folks remember that. And the plane landed from London, and the stewardess said, welcome to Denver. The outside temperature is -20 Celsius. And everyone on the plane was like, take us back to London. So I have endured, although I have enjoyed summer love, it has been many cold winters.
Sure. When was the last time they had a polar vortex in Australia? The Ice Age, maybe?
Never. I had never experienced below freezing temperatures until I moved to the UK, and I'm a runner as well, and I had to learn how to run in sub-zero temperatures.
That's so funny. Yeah, I talked to a guy in Australia periodically, and yeah, he's never seen snow. You can have some of ours. Sometimes there are days, just take it.
We have to manufacture our snow. We do have snowfields, but it's a lot of it's man-made. Yeah.
Oh, wow. There's a place I want to get to at some point. It's like the farthest point in the world to get to, but maybe one day. Cool.
It is beautiful.
I want to take it back to when you were younger. Obviously you were into musicals when you were younger, but were you the black sheep of the family, or did you have a family that was very artistic or into theater and musicals?
Oh, that's a good question. I wasn't really a black sheep in terms of theater. Everyone in my family loved theater. My grandparents grew up in the Philippines and came from Spanish background, and so they performed in zarzuelas growing up, and so opera and music and theater were very big part of our house. And my mom was a ballerina before I was born. So we grew up, it was just always around, like it was just part of our DNA, part of our culture. And a lot of people in my family are performers, not in my immediate family, apart from my mom. But yeah, it was always kind of around. I think I was the black sheep in terms of being a huge nerd. I have a rare mix of loving performing, but also loving research and writing. And I think that made me a little bit different from my immediate family.
So it was in your DNA almost, from the sounds of it.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
being an artist of some kind was
Oh, yeah. My
inevitable.
great grandfather was a concert pianist. My mom was a ballerina, like I said. And even if they weren't performers in my family, like everyone in my family loves music and theater and musicals. And, my grandmother, a vivid memory of my grandmother is every Saturday morning, she would be blasting opera while cleaning the house.
And that makes you wonder, the nature versus nurture thing. Like, I'm the same way. My family has an artistic background and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, maybe it is a little combination of both, but I think nature, it's in the DNA somewhere as well. So
Yeah, we can't help it. My sister is a journalist, and she does presenting, and we can't help ourselves. We like being in front of people.
now, you said when you were older, you did English and history, correct?
That's
so
right.
so what type of history did you take? I'm always curious.
Mostly Australian history, and also women in history, and a lot of war history, actually, like World War II and Australia's role in those conflicts.
Nice. And naturally, that is the perfect progression to musical theater in London. So how did you get from, the English and the Australian history to, going to school in London for musical theater?
Well, my mom had been very insistent while I was growing up. I knew from when I was very young that I wanted to be a performer. And because of her life in ballet, my mom knew how hard it was. And so she was very insistent that we had to have a backup plan, that I had to have something under my belt that wasn't theater. And I chose my undergrad because it was across the street from NIDA, which is the National Institute of Dramatic Art. It's one of the biggest drama schools in Australia. Back then, I say back then, but it's not that long ago, but it's kind of funny how much it's boomed in the last 10, 20 years. There were like 2 drama schools in the whole country. And that was kind of it. So I had chosen UNSW because it was across the street from NIDA, and I'd always loved English and history, and I did well in them in school. And so that's what I ended up majoring in. And then after I finished my undergrad, I went traveling with my boyfriend at the time and spent almost a year like traveling through Europe. I walked across Spain. We did the Camino, which is a 500-mile pilgrimage across northern Spain. And it was an amazing experience. And we worked at the summer camp where I would eventually meet my husband. But that boyfriend at the time, we were engaged, and I was like planning to become a Montessori teacher. It was kind of a very different life. And then that engagement ended, and I had a year of being, oh, what am I doing with my life? Who am I? What do I want? And came to the realization that I really wanted to pursue performing. And I knew I wanted to live overseas as well. And saw an audition for Central, and I thought, that looks cool, and kind of auditioned on a whim and fell over when I got in. I couldn't believe it, because it's such an amazing school and such an amazing program that was really cool because it combined performance with research, and very few programs do that. Huh. So I packed my bags and skipped off to London.
I'm curious about this research aspect of the school. What did that entail, and how did that work?
We wrote a thesis. We got to do research. Part of the coursework was understanding theory and understanding history and combining that with performance studies. So we did, we had dance classes and singing classes and acting classes, and we did a show. We did Sunday in the Park with George. Oh, so beautiful. And alongside that, we were doing this original research to try and like advance the field in musical theater. And something that always makes me laugh is that musical theater was like when you talk about black sheep, like musical theater was a separate program, and we weren't allowed to mingle with the straight acting students.
What?
It's interesting to me how musical theater scholarship was not taken seriously. I think that's changing a lot in recent times, but certainly when I was at Central, it was deemed a separate world.
Wow, that's what I think most students who are in musical theater should have to take some kind of course like that, because to understand your craft, you have to know your craft. And it's great, you can be the most talented singer, actor, dancer, whatever, but if you don't understand why or the hows or where it came from, you're just limiting yourself. So I think that's a fantastic thing they had to offer.
It was fascinating. And I had gone there intending to write my thesis on something to do with Australian musicals. I had briefly run a podcast when toward the end of my time in Australia about Australian musical theater, which was just absolutely burgeoning at that time. And it's exploded, since then. It's, when I was growing up, we were lucky to have 1 or 2 musicals a year.
Yeah.
And now there are, dozens playing, and it wasn't the case when I was growing up. And it's really exciting to see how much it has exploded. I wish there was more Australian work. Anyway, that's a whole other thing, tangent. But so I had intended to write my thesis on Australian musicals in some form. I didn't know what that was going to be. And then while I was at Central, a group of friends and I went to see a cinema screening of Company, filmed at Lincoln Center, the New York Philharmonic production with Neil Patrick Harris, Patti LuPone, Stephen Colbert, a whole bunch of others. And before the screening, there was an interview with the producer, Ellen Krass. And she said in this interview, she couldn't get funding for the film, or she'd had trouble getting funding because no one had heard of filming a stage musical. And I sat up in my seat and I was like, wait a second. I grew up watching Into the Woods on VHS and Victor Victoria. And I was baffled, like, why hadn't people heard of this? It was totally a thing. And I, the next day, went in and changed my thesis to filmed live musicals.
Wow.
Because I was just like, how can this not be a thing? And it was really fascinating doing the research, because I discovered there's so much resistance to the idea of filming theater and filming musicals in particular. And I came up with this historic list of, at that time, it was about 80 shows that had been, that I was able to find. And then over the past 10 years, it's just exploded. And then the last 2 years, specifically, like with the pandemic, this whole, I never imagined when I, decided to change my topic that day, what it would become.
Very cool. So we'll talk about the website that you created, but let's go to summer camp first.
Oh, sure.
So because we have to figure out how you got to the States to take this to the next level. So you went to summer camp, you met your future husband, which is fantastic. Was it an easy idea to move to the States, or is there a big difference between Sydney and London and Colorado?
Yeah, I mean, I was so fortunate, first of all, to be able to go to London, because I was there pre-Brexit, and I also have a Spanish passport. And so I was able to live and work in London on my Spanish passport.
Yeah.
And like the timing of that, I just couldn't do that anymore. It's just not possible. But I'm so grateful I had that experience, because London is such an extraordinary city. It's so beautiful. It's so walkable. And it's just got such an amazing history. I would pinch myself, like I would walk through a park and I'd be like, this is where Virginia Woolf hung out. And like that it blew my mind. I loved it so much.
Yeah.
But when Aaron and I decided that we didn't want to do long distance anymore. We actually looked into bringing him to London
Mm.
and discovered it was like completely unfeasible with the cost of the visa and everything. And we at first we didn't want to get married. We were like, we wanted to be together, but we didn't want to get married. And when we had looked through all the options of how I could live here, we discovered, the easiest thing to do was to get married. And so we applied for the visa, and oh my God, it took nearly a year for the visa to be approved.
Yeah.
And it got held up because I went for my interview and I had this like giant stack of papers, like proving who I was and where I'd been, and that our relationship was legit. Like I had photos, and I mean, it was crazy. And the amount of paperwork, it's nuts. And got to the interview, they like went through every single piece of paper, like stamped it, they cross correlate it with something else.
Yeah.
And they get to the end of the interview and they say, well, Miss Lyons, everything looks fantastic, but we need your police certificate from Australia. And I was like, what? And I was meant to provide a police certificate showing that I wasn't a criminal in Australia. And I had to wait. I had to apply for this certificate and wait for it to be shipped by snail mail from Sydney to London. So it was a very stressful, horrible period waiting for that to come. And then it finally came through, and I moved over to Colorado. And my husband was doing his master's at Colorado State in Fort Collins. And I'd never heard of it when we met. I was like, what is this place? And I'm so glad I got to live there. It's this beautiful mountain town, and they have a great theater scene there. And I immediately, like literally 3 days off the flight, booked my first gig. I got to do the Tempest with Open Stage Theater, and like just fell in love with the people and the place. And living in the US is completely insane. It's infuriating. I bang my head against the wall every day at how crazy the systems are and how expensive it is, and healthcare and all of that. But also, I love it so much. There are a lot of systematic problems, but there's just so much opportunity here that I wouldn't have had where I was.
For sure. Well, and thank you for telling us about the visa and everything, because I like to have on the podcast, not just musical theater, but to help people who need visas to move because of marriage. It's, I want to provide as much information to our listeners as possible. So
it's so hard. And I feel for people applying during COVID and post 2016. I know that it became even slower and harder, and the bureaucracy it's awful to navigate. It's really like, I think about people who are seeking asylum or who are refugees, and who come. I have a very cushy circumstance. Like I'm very, very, very lucky. I wasn't fleeing war. I wasn't fleeing persecution. And when I think of what those people have to go through, the hoops you have to jump through to move here are immense. And I get really angry when people treat people who are seeking a better life with such disdain and such contempt, because they've been through hell to get here.
It's true. It's true. Let's talk about your website.
Sure.
Filmed Live Musicals. You mentioned briefly in your bio how it started, but could you expand on that and tell us a little bit about the website itself?
Sure. So like I said, I started it after I had been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. I went through 11 rounds of full body radiation, 3 rounds of chemo, and a stem cell transplant. And yes, it saved my life. Thank you, everyone at Memorial Sloan Kettering and my sister for being the stem cell donor. It was really debilitating. I lost an octave in my singing voice. I lost all my hair, which I actually didn't mind being bald. I love being bald. I lost my fingernails and toenails, fell off one by one, like just a myriad of horrible side effects that left me really depleted and like fetal on the couch a lot of the time. And I needed things to do to occupy myself and to not be miserable and depressed. And part of that was running. I ran 5 marathons in the years after my treatment, and ran my 5th marathon on the 5th anniversary of my transplant, because I'm a total sucker for self-torture. But then I also filmed live musicals and spent time researching each show, researching its history, why it was filmed, who filmed it, when they filmed it, is it available now, is it available on DVD, is it available online? And several years later, the database now has over 160 shows. So it has information on all of those shows, all the information I just shared. And you can search the database by if it was filmed on Broadway or off Broadway, West End or regional. And eventually I want to add more search functions so that you can search by like artist and that kind of thing. So it's ever growing, and I have a to-do list a mile long of things I want to do to make it even better. And I also have a backlog of over 300 shows to add, because the pandemic has exploded what is available, which is really fantastic. But it's also a lot of work.
I hear you. How many of the shows have you watched?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Many. Not all yet.
Yeah.
Some are not available anymore, like the really early ones, which is such a shame. The early shows that were broadcast on the BBC, Magyar Melody, and what's the other one called? Me and My Girl, and there's another, Under Your Hat. They were all filmed, broadcast live from the West End by the BBC. Yeah. And they didn't save those recordings at that time. They weren't able to record them as they broadcast them. So they're lost to time, sadly. Wow. But yeah, there's still a lot on my to watch list.
What one have you watched that people might not know of that they really should see? Ooh, is there a particular favorite they just went, I didn't know about this one, and everybody should know about it?
I wish that it's a recent one, Wise Children. It's Emma Rice, who is the former artistic director of the Globe. She when she was dismissed from the Globe, she created her own theater company called Wise Children, and their first production was called Wise Children. It was based on the book, and I just was obsessed with it. It was so beautiful. It was released very briefly during the pandemic, during the initial shutdown, and it was such an amazing, like, gender bending, nonconformist, really and theater based story, and it was just such a great capture as well.
Nice. Is it all English based, or is there other languages for the live shows?
I've started delving into languages other than English. I have a couple in the database already from Russia. There's some more to watch. There's a production of Anna Karenina that is just crazy. It's so opulent and epic, and the costumes are stunning. There's like an ice rink at one point. Like, it's the scale of it. It's beautiful. And they also have another one, Count Orlov, by the same company. And there's some from Korea, and I don't know if they're in the database yet, but I have them on my radar. Shows from Japan as well.
And all these shows, are they free to view? Are there some of them pay-per-view? Like, how does it work?
Oh, it's a total range. Some are free, just available on YouTube. Often the YouTube ones are not entirely legit, in that they're all like Pacific Overtures. Sondheim's Pacific Overtures was filmed in the 70s, actually for distribution on Japanese television. And yeah, I would love to delve into the history of that some more, because I think there's a story to be told there, why Japanese investors and producers wanted to film American Broadway shows for distribution on Japanese television. There was 3 shows that I know of: Pacific Overtures, the Will Rogers Follies, and Victor Victoria. And only Victor Victoria has been officially released in the US. Or outside Japan. But Pacific Overtures, someone has taken that footage and uploaded it to YouTube, and it's not great quality, it's very grainy. So there's shows like that, and then it ranges from everything from, like, pay a few bucks to rent it for 48 hours to you need a subscription to one of the, like, Broadway HD or digital theater to be able to access it. So it's a real range. And then a lot of shows are also available on DVD and Blu-ray.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's talk about the other thing where, we kind of met and learned more and talked about the Consortium of American Streamed Theater, which sounds really grand and frightening, but tell us a little bit about it and what it is and how important it is, because that's why I came on board with it right at the beginning. Or is it the beginning? I don't know. You'll have to tell us.
Yeah, we're at the beginning. We're something is starting. So Paul Gordon, the composer of Jane Eyre and Broadway's Jane Eyre and the off-Broadway Daddy Longlegs and the regional Pride and Prejudice, he reached out to me on Twitter last year and was feeling really frustrated by the barriers to streaming in the US, to filming and streaming, and the cost of it and how prohibitive it was for union shows. And he was really frustrated and wanted to do something about it. And to fast forward a little bit, he and I, and he's very good friends with David Goldsmith, who is also a composer. He's worked in the West End and Broadway and in Hollywood. And we teamed up and said, okay, what can we do? What can we do to make streaming more accessible and easier and more affordable for people? And so we created CAST, the Consortium of American Streamed Theater. And our goal is to make theater more accessible, affordable, and what's the third? Accessible, affordable, I'm blanking. One sec. It's flown out of my brain after looking at it, 24/7.
Exactly. And it's not new, right?
Yes.
So, but
give me one sec. Sorry.
No problem. But I think this is an important aspect.
Oh, sustainable. That's the last part.
All right.
Accessible, affordable, and sustainable. And we hope to do that through petitioning the unions to make it easier to stream, because the agreements in the US make it very prohibitive right now. Mm-hmm. And also to create a place where people can find this information, because what we're learning is that people are really excited for streamed theater, especially since the pandemic, but they don't know where to find it. Mm-hmm. Unless they kind of know, oh, this particular theater, my local theater happens to be streaming this thing. Yeah. But we want to make it more available to people.
Yeah. And it's, with everything that's going on, it is the perfect time for people to start looking into it and exploring it, and not just now because we're in the pandemic, we're all stuck at home and we want to see theater, but beyond, because I agree, live streaming theater is so important, because it opens up possibilities, opportunities, not just for the performers to make money afterwards, but if I'm living in Singapore, I'm not going to see a Broadway show. I'm not going to see some of these shows, but now the opportunity is there and help the shows grow. So congratulations.
And the flip side of that,
coming up with that.
Oh, thank you. Well, the flip side of that is that, those of us that are fortunate to live close to the big centers like New York or London or Toronto, that we can access shows far away from us. So throughout the pandemic, I've been watching shows like from Korea and Japan and Russia and the Philippines and stuff from Australia and from Canada and all across the US. And that's really exciting to me, because it decenters the like the Broadway West End model, which those things are great. And we all, like, of course I love Broadway and of course I love the West End, but there's so much happening outside of those places, and the innovative new stuff is happening outside of those centers.
Musical theater is a global thing. It's not just West End. It's not just Broadway, which a lot of people think is the be all and end all. And yes, you're right. There's great stuff on both of them because they are the pinnacle. But you know what? There's great stuff everywhere, and people deserve and need to discover these. So how can people get involved with casts?
Sure. So the first thing to do would be to visit our website, Consortium American Streamed Theatre.weebly. And you can, there's a tab to join us, and you'll fill out a survey that will ask you how you would like to be involved. And we are also, I don't know when this episode is going out, we're hosting a town hall on Sunday, June 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern time.
June?
And we will, sorry, June. What am I talking about? January. June is so far away. January 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we will definitely be hosting more of those town hall events. So stay posted. And hopefully with Jean-Paul's amazing virtual theater will be involved. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but you know what? It's still important, whether it's today, tomorrow, next month, next year. This is, you know what? I think this is a fantastic thing. And I'm so happy I was able to meet you and get in on the ground floor of this and be, you know, let's like start a revolution from within and make a difference. And I think if you are creators or actors or producers, anybody who's listening right now, this is super important because it affects you all you listeners, even just the regular Joe Schmo and Jane Schmo. You know, you're going to be able to see stuff that you might not have seen before. So yeah, I love what you're doing, and yeah, that's fantastic, and congratulations.
Thank you. We're just so excited because, like we say, it opens up theater. It provides access to people who might not otherwise be able to get there, for reasons of cost or geography or disability, childcare. There's so many reasons why people can't get to the theater, and this is a way to help those people get to the theater. And what the research shows is that streams encourage people to go to real life in-person theater.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really exciting too. So it's not a replacement for in-person theater. It's a supplemental way to enjoy it. It's a different way to enjoy it. And just quickly, the research on that shows that people watching a stream or watching a theater via cinema have just as much an emotional reaction and connection to what's happening on stage as people who are there in person. Yep. So we know that, theater lovers know that. We just got to convince people that this is the future. It's going to change branding and income, and it's going to provide extra income for all the artists involved.
Yeah, it's theater will never go away. Theater is life, and that's how we all want to see it. And I don't understand people's thoughts that, oh, the streaming will stop people from going. Bootlegs never stopped people from going to the theater. That makes them want to go more to see what they've seen.
The same arguments happened when radio became a thing, like, oh, radio is going to kill in person. And then it happened when television was invented. Oh, television is going to kill live theater. And then when records, cast albums became a thing, original recordings, cast recordings.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't have a cast recording. You're giving away the show. People won't come anymore. What is the number one thing that people buy when they go to a show? The cast recording.
Yeah, I know. You're onto something fantastic, and I look forward to joining you on this journey forward into wherever it takes us. How do people check out your website? What's the website for Filmed Live Musicals?
filmedlivemusicals.com, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Awesome. Luisa, thank you so much for coming on and talking about yourself, your career, your life, and all the many things that you are helping people discover with the Filmed Live Musicals and the cast as well. But before we go, I always ask 3 questions of my guests Now, there's no right or wrong answer, but you might give a wrong answer, depending on what people think. But don't be scared. Don't be scared. We'll throw a nice softball at you, or lob a cricket ball. Maybe is that better for being in Australia? I love watching cricket. I'm going to say that right now. I love watching it. I don't know how you feel about it. Some people might not be a fan, but
I'm not a fan of watching, but I did play in high school. It's a lot of fun.
I would love to do that one day, but that's a whole sidebar, side tangent. Okay, question number 1. What creator or team within musical theater has had a great influence on you? Now, it could be a composer, lyricist, director, producer, actor, even stage manager. Could be somebody famous or not famous, like a teacher. Is there anybody in musical theater that's had a big influence on you?
I think, well, of course, Julie Andrews, to start off with. I grew up obsessively watching Mary Poppins. Like, I would play it and then rewind it and watch it again. And so I feel like she's family. And Doris Day would be another one. The Pajama Game was the first time I saw a woman who was really sassy and was in charge, and romance didn't come first, and I was really drawn to that. And then on a personal note, my high school drama teacher, Mr. Harrison, and music teacher, Miss Boyle, they saw something in me that I didn't know I had yet, and were so kind and nurturing and gave me so many opportunities that were very important to me, that helped form who I am.
Awesome. I love when people mention the unsung heroes. You know what? 99.999% of people won't know who this is, but they're still important. And you know, everybody has one of those people in their lives that just doesn't get the recognition they deserve. So 1 point. Awesome. So good roll. Good start. So question number 2. We know you live in the States now, but is there one thing from Australia and one thing from the UK that you would wish was in the States that you just don't have there that you wish you could have?
Australian lollies or candy. They are infinitely better than anything in the US. I'm like all of it. Freckles. There's an Australian chip, like crisps, potato chips, called Toobs, Toobs.
Okay.
And they're like a barbecue-y, yummy. Oh, I'm drooling thinking about it. I miss them. So yeah, Australian lollies.
Nice. See, and there's so many things out there that we'll never get where we are. Like, I looked down at some of the stuff just in the States that I can't get here in Canada. And I'm like, okay, when I go down, I got to try that. I got to try that. I got to try that. So
you're reminding me to put in my order. There's a company in Australia that does like flat shipping. You can order up to like 100 or a minimum of $100 worth of junk food and have it shipped. I think the time has come to put in an order.
Nice. I'm glad I could remind you of that. Correct answer, another point. So question number 3, the one we may judge you on, or I won't, but somebody might. We don't know. Food in the theater or cell phones in the theater, which are worse?
I've worked for a long time as an usher.
Okay.
And both, oh God. I mean, what I have loved about the good thing about the pandemic is I mean, I feel bad for the food and beverage staff because they're out of work, but not having food is so good. You don't hear this constant rustling and chewing. And so but I understand, like, it is nice to, you know, have a drink and have a nibble and something while you're watching a show. I understand it, but people are the worst. And cell phones, I don't understand why people, like, I've watched at Harry Potter, I ushered briefly at the Broadway Cursed Child, and someone was Snapchatting the show, and I was like, okay, first of all, there's 0 point to what you're doing because it's going to vanish in whatever the time thing
Yeah.
is. And I didn't like, I don't, just be there. It makes me crazy. So both are the worst.
Totally
Because people
agree.
are the worst.
People are the worst, aren't they? You gave the
I love
correct
them,
answer.
but sheesh.
Since you were an usher, what was the worst thing that you saw like lying around you had to clean up? Because that's why I hate food, because for the ushers, there's so much garbage out there. But
Well, I haven't thankfully had to clean up anything horrible.
Okay.
But I did witness a couple picking each other's noses. And it's just like, is this actually happening? You're in a public, you're surrounded by 1,200 people, and they were literally picking each other's noses.
Each other's? Not even their own?
Yes. No, it was disgusting.
Okay, I got nothing on that one. 3 out of 3. I'd want to give you an extra point for the nose thing, but I just can't. I'm sorry you had to endure.
Nobody wins. Nobody wins.
Congratulations. There's no prizes, but you can brag to everybody in Australia and that you were the winner here on the station. Luisa, thank you again so much for coming on and talking about everything that you're doing, and best of luck with it. And I look forward to being a part of this journey with you.
Thank you. Likewise. Super excited to have you aboard.
Awesome. So we were just speaking with Luisa Lyons from Filmed Live Musicals, the website, as well as Consortium of American Streamed Theater. Definitely check out those websites if you love watching musicals and if you want to get involved with streaming musicals for the foreseeable future. Join us next week as we'll be speaking with another guest or guests about their life, love, and passion that is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.